Hi everyone. So I'm back with part 4 of Birthing New Beginnings. So I'm sorry. My God had me up late last night talking. I mean, he really was just talking and wanting to connect with me and help me understand. Why I'm chosen. Because I kept asking him, I'm like, are you sure? Are you sure it's me? And he said, yeah, it's you. And I said, why? And so now that I've birthed my blessings and I've done all the work that I've done to get to where I am now, with God's leading, you know, He helps you recognize the areas that you need to pray about, to have Him come in, and then depending on the strength of the particular spirit or idol, you'll have to fast or you'll have to do some seed sowing, you know, so it all depends on how God is going to lead you in that moment. And God wanted me to understand how I felt, how He felt about my heart. And sorry guys, when I got to the park that I like, there was a medical emergency. One of the homeless people was struggling, so they called the fire department. And what's interesting, the number on the fire truck is number 9. And we know that to be an ending. And here I am birthing on Monday, and on Wednesday, it's the end of the emergency. Which means my husband's right around the corner. Okay. So he was really having this conversation with me about my heart. He wanted me to understand why I am so special to him. Because in my life, I've never felt special. I've never felt like I had anything to offer. And this isn't from anything that I've done. It's just the witchcraft that was done on me and the word beatdowns that I received over the years. That's what they told me. That I was worthless, that I had nothing to offer anyone, that I was a drag, that I was wasted space. And God wanted me to understand why he took me this route. Because it did feel like punishment for a while. Over a lot of it. Took me away from my friends, people I thought were friends. Took me away from family. Took me away from my children. And then he brings me to a place, to more family, that I thought was going to replace the family that I lost. And instead he took me away from them too. And I thought, what have I done to deserve to be alone? And God was answering me. Finally, after all these months of asking, of knocking, of leaning in, he finally answered and said, your heart is special. And I don't think of myself as special. I don't look at myself as more than anyone else. Will I stand for injustice? No, I will not. If something is being done that is not right, I will speak up, even if I'm not the one that benefits from it. I never do anything out of a place of hate. I always do it out of a place of love. And I can't explain it. You have to just be there when it happens. It's this overwhelming feeling that I have to move and I have to do and I have to say in that moment. Because if it was up to me, I'd be in the back. You know, I wouldn't be front and center stage. And this morning, so he had me up till 1. And then he finally let me drift off to sleep as we were talking. And then he woke me up again at 3. And I was like, Father, I haven't slept. He goes, that's okay, you can sleep tomorrow. I'm like, okay. And he goes, but it's important for me for you to understand. And you don't understand. And I'm like, well, I understand that the love that I need to show to everyone is your love. And I said, I have that capacity, that big of a heart, that I can love everyone, even the ones that hate me. And he says, yes, you do. And I said, but you made me that way, but you knew. And he said, yes, I knew. But it is different to actually see it. And I just was like, what? Because to me, when he says that he is the beginning and the end, I figured he sees everything. So how could he say that it's different when he sees it? And he said, you don't understand. When I'm working, I'm seeing and I'm watching and observing. But what happens when you're working? You don't really pay attention to the details. And he goes, that's right. He goes, of course I pay attention to the details, but it's not the same. And then he says to me, it's when I turn over, not the finished product or not the finished blessing. It's when I'm having you walk in faith that I actually get to spend time to see your heart in action. I get to see, because he can see all the way into our hearts. And he says, and I can see all the way down into your heart. And he says, and it's a different thing to see day after day, night after night, month after month, year after year. To see your heart get softer and more loving. And I'm still not like putting everything together. I'm like, why is he being so specific about my heart? And then he says, you need to go take Apollo to the bathroom. I'm like, okay. So I got up, put everything down, drove down to the park. And then he says, you're not going to make it to the bathroom at QT. You need to go to the bathroom right now. I'm like, is it open? He goes, just go. I'm like, okay. Like, worst case scenario, I'm going to have to turn around and come back. And so I did as God said. I walked over. And the doors were open. I went to the bathroom. And I didn't think about it in that moment, but I'm like, doors were open. And so then, I finished my business. I came, washed my hands, came back out. Ended up walking back to my truck and got my dog in, got myself in. And we're driving down to the park I'm at right now. And God starts to talk to me again. And he says, did you notice the gates were open? I'm like, yeah. And he goes, because no man can shut. I'm like, okay. And then he says, because he had me watch Ariel Sparks last night. And he had me pray over her. And and I asked God, I'm like, why do I need to pray over her? I'm like, you're covering her, aren't you? And he says, just pray over her and cover her in prayer. I'm like, okay. So I was obedient. And this morning, he asked me, he goes, how did you feel when I asked you to pray over Ariel? I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, I was happy to do it. She's my sister. I want to help in whatever way I can to protect her and to cover her in prayer. And he says, you weren't jealous of her, the things she was saying? I'm like, no, I'm excited for her. I'm like, you finally brought her a man. You're constantly blessing her with money and sustenance. And I said, and I know one day you'll do the same for me when it's my turn. And he goes, and then, so this is while I'm driving. And then he drops the movie 27 Dresses. And I was like, 27 dresses? Why? And he says to me, what does she do in that movie? And I focused on what the interaction between her and her boss. And I'm like, oh, she was in love with this man, and she thought he was the one for her, and she's making all these plans in her head. And I said, but it wasn't until her sister came into the picture and started to make it was actually interested in him and physically going after him and wanting to be with him, that she started to go into action. I said, but she went the wrong way. She was, she was helping her sister lie, and she was helping her sister cover up who she really was, instead of being honest with him and saying, hey, this isn't who my sister is. You need to be aware that she's just pretending. And God's like, no. I'm like, no? He's like, no. He's like, what was she doing in the beginning of the movie? She was going to a wedding. How many weddings has she been to? 27 weddings. And he says, what did she do every wedding? I'm like, oh, she went above and beyond. She made sure that the bride had everything she needed, that there was nothing the bride needed to concern herself with. I said, and that's why they gave her the top honor of being a bride, a maid of honor, because she was so selfless and made sure that everyone was taken care of, that she was a maid of honor for. And he says, that's you. And I'm like, huh? And he goes, Every daughter I've sent you to, you have lifted them up in prayer. You have supported them. You have encouraged them. Even though your situation isn't good, even though you could really use some help, you put yourself aside to do what I asked you to do. And I'm like, isn't that what I'm supposed to do? And God actually, I could feel his tears. And I'm like, why are you crying? And he said, because you have no idea how special you are to me. I just don't understand. And he says it takes a strong heart to love in hard times. And I just didn't understand still. Like, I'm like, I don't get it. And he's like, do you hate the woman that raised you? No. I was there when she beat you. I was there when she wrapped her hands in your hair and dragged you, cursing my name. I still didn't hate you. And when she would curse your name, it would hurt me. And the reason that God has been bringing all this to me is I have these white napkins that I got from work. And I've been using them to take the excess oil off my face. Because when I sweat, it's not, the sweat doesn't bead. I just get very oily skin. So I was using the napkins to wipe the excess oil off. And the napkins started to fall apart in my hand. And I'm like, and I started laughing. And God goes, what? And I said, oh, it just reminded me of when the woman who raised me would, use tissue paper to wipe herself off. And they would start to crumble and she would have pieces of paper all over her face, but she would use toilet paper. And he goes, yeah, that woman is one stubborn lady. And I was like, huh? And he goes, why do you think she was sweating? And I was like, you were turning up the heat. And he goes, oh yeah. He goes, I turned up the heat more often than you can count. And he said, every time she did something evil to you, I was there, turning up the heat, telling her in her heart to stop, to change, to behave. And she hardened her heart. She would not bend. She hated you that much. To hear those words from God, that the woman who supposedly called herself my mother had hate for me in her heart. I pray for her, that she finds God's mercy, that she changes her mind in the last second before her last breath. But God already told me that she's not going to. She has become bitter and hardened, and there is nothing that will change her from that. Sorry guys, there's these new little bugs they're pincher bugs, and they hurt when they pinch. So And at the first, I didn't understand why God was sending me to all these prophets. I'm like, it really looks like I have itchy ears. And he goes, no, there was a reason. There was a method to my madness. And I said, I see it now. And he said, I needed to know how you would behave seeing all these sisters getting things, knowing the road that you had that I had you on. And I was like, you have a road for each of us. And I can't judge one sister because you had her walk a certain way and feel good about it, knowing that I'm not supposed to judge because that's not my place. And so when I got here, I was passing by because they never opened the gates. So this conversation was happening as I was driving here to this park. And I thought, I'm going to have to park on the other side of the park because they never open these doors on time. Well, there's a sign that says they won't open until 8, but they open when they feel like it. But today there was a medical emergency. And so I was able to come in. And God said again, the gates are open. And I'm like, the gates to what? And he said, the gates to the kingdom are open for you. This is the end of your emergencies. He says, you're on the cusp. Enjoy your last day. And when I first obeyed God and started this channel, I had no idea that he was going to use it for me to provide testimony. He didn't want it to be like everyone else's channel. He had enough prophets giving instruction, teaching how to discern, teaching how to hear God. He didn't want more instruction. He wanted to show examples. He wanted to show what it will look like when you're walking with God. To the non-child of God, the one that has spirits on them, they look at me and they think she's not walking with God. Even some of God's children think I'm not walking with God. Because in their mind, God would never take me this way. God would never have me live in my car. Well, all of this has been a test for me to see just how much is true the words that I said to God, that I am a willing vessel for him to use me however he sees fit, without question. There were times where I'd be like, did I hear you right? You want me to go into this bar? He's like, yep. And I was like, okay. And I'd be sitting there for hours. I'm like, these people probably think I'm a drunk. And he goes, yep. I'm like, what? So now he has me reminiscing about all the things that I've been through. And we're cracking up. It's like we're watching a movie with popcorn. And he's passing reels of my life. And he goes, do you remember this? I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, why? And now he's explaining some of the, it reminds me of, have you ever, um, only those of us that are old enough to remember this will know, Siskel and Ebert, when they're reviewing a movie and they're sitting there and they're talking through the movie and giving you the highlights. And he'll pass a clip of my life and he'll be like, oh, that was a doozy. And I'm looking at him like, what? And he goes, do you remember this? I'm like, yes, I remember it. How can I forget? And he goes, did you hate me? I'm like, no, I didn't hate you, but I didn't understand. I'm like, I thought I had done something wrong. He goes, I know. Of all my children, you're the one that always kept thinking you did something wrong. I'm like, because I usually did. And he goes, no, you didn't. And so we've been reminiscing over my life and hearing him have the cliff notes. And sometimes he'll even go over like the background characters. And he goes, you didn't see this one, did you? And I'm like, that is so, like, what? And he'll tell me, he's like, yeah, I just put this one in your memory just to see if you'd see it and start laughing. I'm like, what? Like he'll put random things in my background of the view of what I'm seeing. And like sometimes it's like a Where's Waldo kind of thing, and just random things. Like it'll be an ice cream truck in the wrong place and I'm like, okay. Or it'll be somebody wearing a Christmas sweater in the summer and it's not cold and I'm like, okay. Or someone who's wearing flip-flops in the dead of winter and it's snowing and I'm just like, what the and I'm like, God, why is this? And he would tell me, he goes, I put these things in your memory. And even though you saw them, I didn't bring them to your attention because when we go back, he goes, I was waiting for the end so we could do this right here. And I was like, really? So this is what we were talking about on the way here. It was my life. And I'm just like, okay. And oh my goodness. So God was just wanting me to show that he is a fun God. And when you get to the end, you'll get to see the fun God. You'll get to experience the jokester that he is. And he'll take you through your memories and he'll highlight things, or he'll highlight words that were said out of context and you're just like in the moment it doesn't make sense, but when you're looking back you're like, oh my goodness, how did I not see that? Or he'll send you to different locations and you'll be like, were you punking me? And he's like, yep. And he goes, well, you were so sure you knew where you were going, so I just said, sure, go that way. And I was like, wow. And he's like, you were a woman on a mission. I couldn't stop you. I'm like, yes, you could. You could have said no. And he goes, but then we wouldn't have anything to laugh about. Oh my goodness. And that's what the ending has been about. Getting back my joy. Getting back the happiness that Lucifer stole. I have laughed more in the last 8 hours than I have laughed in my entire life. Because God has not stopped with the jokes. And most of them about my life. And I'm just like, wow. And but he doesn't do it in a way that makes you feel like your life is a joke. He does it in a way that makes you realize that he thought enough of you. He thought enough of the ending and how much struggle you would go through, that he put some funny things that you could look back on and laugh. Just know, I always cover everyone in prayer. So be safe out there and know that God is always watching. And he's gonna give you a funny ending. In the name of my Lord Jesus, amen.